Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Welcome to what I think is going to be a very special talk that's going to take us right to the cutting, bleeding edge of what's going on in supply chain today. My name is David Spalding. I'm the Raisbeck Endowed Dean of the Debbie and Jerry Ivy College of Business, and it's a pleasure to have you all here with us for this fascinating talk. Our guest today is Alan Amling, Vice President of Corporate Strategy at UPS, one of the world's largest logistics companies. Alan leads their Global On-Demand Manufacturing Initiative, helping companies leverage 3D printing to take time, cost, and carbon out of their supply chain. He moved into this role after serving as Vice President of Marketing for UPS Logistics and Distribution. He began his career with UPS in 1982, working as a seasonal employee for 4 years, where he performed a variety of jobs, including package handler and car washer. I don't think that's part of today's talk. He really
surprised.
There we are, right. He really learned about the company from the ground up. Since rejoining UPS in 1992, Alan has held numerous leadership roles in industrial engineering, customer technology, and new product development. Alan is not only a TED speaker, he's also spoken at many key conferences and important occasions, including speaking to the House Commerce and Energy Committee. Alan is a native of Grants Pass, Oregon. He earned his MBA from Indiana University and his BA in Psychology and Business from Lewis and Clark College. He's currently pursuing a doctorate in business at Kennesaw State University with a focus on business model innovation. We really appreciate having him here with us today at the Ivy College, so let's give Alan a great warm welcome.
Thank you, Dean Spalding. All right, can everyone hear me okay? Great. All right, it's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor. Today we're going to talk about disruption. We're going to talk about the supply chain. We're going to talk about innovation. And disruption tends to have a negative connotation. If you're disrupted, you're Blockbuster, right? You're Kodak. Your business has been hurt by a young upstart. I don't buy into that. I don't think disruption is necessarily bad. I think disruption is nothing more than change. And change has been going on since the dawn of time. And whether change is good or bad depends on what side of the change you're on. And so what I'm going to talk about today is how do companies like UPS see this world? And all the change that's going on right now. It's a fascinating time to be alive. And for all of you students out there, I really envy you, because you're going to be coming on to the job market at a time when there's going to be more change and more opportunity than we've seen in years. There's some fundamental things that are going on that you're already seeing that are going to begin changing the way we do business. So, you know UPS, we deliver your packages during the holidays. You might not know that we're a little over $60 billion. We have 425,000 employees. We've been around for 111 years. Blah, blah, blah. We're a big company. What I want to talk to you about today is, how are we going to make sure that we're around for another 111 years? How does a company like UPS, or any of the companies around here, a John Deere, a Caterpillar, you name it, all established companies that have existing customers, have existing investors, have people that have grown up in that company, all face similar challenges. So how do they stay around? How do they stay relevant? Because this is happening. Let's see. There we go. Pigs are flying. You ever hear the saying about, that'll happen when pigs fly, and people will say that when they don't think, they say, oh, that's a crazy idea. That'll happen when pigs fly. I used this as an analogy in my TED Talk that I did a couple years ago, and it's just as true today. It's what happens when the impossible becomes possible. The things that, the boundaries, the conditions that we thought were in place are not in place anymore. And I'm going to talk specifically about that in this talk, and I want you to think about that. We've grown up thinking about things are a certain way. So for example, shoes. When I buy shoes, I'm going to buy a size 10 shoe. That's the size I wear. But this whole idea of best fit, of I'm going to buy something that is closest to what I want, is starting to go away with 3D printing and things like that. And so we're going to touch on those, and I want you to think about that as I go through my talk. And the other thing that I want to say is I'm going to open it up for questions at the end. Open season on Alan. Whatever you want to ask me, I'll answer it to the best of my ability. So 130,000. What's 130,000? So 130,000 is how many new employees Amazon hired just last year. Let me put that into perspective for you. The average Fortune 500 company has about 53,000 employees. In 1 year, they added just about 2.5 Fortune 500 companies to their payroll. Now, is there a lot of exits and entrants? Are they buying people? Yes. By the way, this is organic, though. It doesn't include the acquisitions they've made. And so I think about the companies that are growing really, really fast. So Amazon is one, but Netflix, Uber, Amazon, you name it. What is the one thing that all of these companies have in common that are just lighting it up? They're all great at connecting. They're all really, really good at connecting suppliers, connecting customers, connecting around the world. They're very good at connecting. And I'm in a logistics company. Fundamentally, that's what we do. And I'll tell you a story that it kind of scared me a little bit. I was talking to an editor at Fortune magazine. This was about 1.5 years ago, and I was going through my spiel, and I said, "Yeah, UPS, we're essentially a connection company." And he smiled, and I said, "Okay." I said something that just struck you that you thought was a little funny. What was it? He said, "Well, Jack Ma was just in here yesterday, and he said the same thing about Alibaba, the exact same words." And I went, "Oh my gosh, we're living in a different arena." So 130,000. The other story that just kind of rocked me was toothpaste. So I love cinnamon crest toothpaste. That's what I love. And one morning, I ran out. And this is when same-day delivery had just come to my area from Amazon. And I'm a logistics guy. I know how much it costs to deliver stuff. So I said, I'm going to put them to the test. I'm going to order 1 tube of Cinnamon Crest toothpaste, and I'm going to pay, I think I had to pay $3 for same-day delivery. I know that doesn't cost $3. And so I got home that night about 6:30, no Crest toothpaste. Okay, yeah, same day. Then at about 7 o'clock, a Lincoln Town Car pulls up to my driveway, and the driver gets out and delivers my tube of Crest toothpaste. And it was at that moment I'm going, oh my God, pigs are flying. Pigs are absolutely flying. So big changes going on in the market. So the biggest change is who has the power, right? The commercial internet, as all of you know, has shifted power to the consumer. But it's really interesting, and as you study different businesses, ask them who their customer is and see if it's changed since like 1950 or 1970 or even 1990 or 2000. Most companies think about their business in a very similar way and who their customer is. And I was thinking about this the other week. I was doing this design thinking session with a couple other big companies, and we were talking about procurement. And so when this university, I'm sure, has a procurement policy, all big companies, manufacturers, everything has to go through procurement, and they make sure everything is compliant, that you're not buying stuff from banned countries, and they're trying to control the spend and everything. One of the biggest issues that procurement departments have right now is people aren't using them. People are going around these procurement departments. Why? Because it's easier. They can get what they want, sometimes at a lower cost, by going around the procurement department. And so these companies I was talking to said, our goal is to find a way to force people to go through the procurement department so that we can control the spend. And it's like, okay. That's an answer. I don't know if you're asking the right question. Why is it that people are going around? It's because of this change that we're seeing, where the commercial internet is just allowing people, and you know, Amazon and others are making it really easy for people to buy outside. Proliferation. So what I'm talking about there is everyone here has smartphones, right? So now it's true here. It's even more true outside of the United States. People are using smartphones, but it's beyond that. I'm talking about what's under the banner of Industry 4.0 technologies that you may have heard of some of these things. So blockchain, machine learning, sensors and Internet of Things, robotics, 3D printing, it all falls into this. It's all about this proliferation of technology. And what is so different about it is it used to be that companies were in industries, right? And now it's like you look at Apple, you look at Google, you look at Amazon. What industry are they in? Yeah, you know, they're in, Alibaba's the same way. They're in entertainment. They're in the auto market. They're obviously in technology. They're all in these different industries, and it's all enabled by this new technology. So the key is, when I talk about who's the customer, what's your role in it, everything's getting flipped on its head. And you're coming out of school at a really important time. And I'm going to hit on why in just a moment. But so 1.6 billion in online commerce. you may have read, you know, UPS. We basically had during the cyber weekend. We have a huge network. We had more packages coming in than our system could handle. And you think about it, at the end of the day, we buy stuff, physical stuff. And logistics companies sit at the nexus between the digital and the physical. And it's really easy, it's a lot easier to scale up digital than it is physical. And that's a huge challenge that's going to take a lot of smart people and a lot of logisticians and a lot of technologists to figure out how do we throw a layer of technology over these physical operations so that we can go faster, that we can do more. That's going to be absolutely critical. The other thing is around globalization. So I like these two pictures because they tell a story. This is Shenzhen in 1980. This is Shenzhen today. The rapid increase in commerce globally with an increasing middle class. You know, I'm not going to get political with you today, but there's obviously a lot of talk right now about the tariffs and what's that going to do. There's some fundamental facts. Now, UPS is a proponent of free trade, of global trade. Let's get that out there. Obviously, that's good for us, but we think it's good for the economy. But we think it's good for the country as well because of this. 2/3 of the purchasing power that we want to sell to is outside our borders. So we need to figure out a way to get at that. So this is where the connectivity idea came from. So this is a gentleman, Barack Khanna, who basically talks about connectivity is the new maxim. It is, and I would say that when you look at companies that you want to go work for, one of the things that you want to look for is who's on the outside of the network and who is central to the network. So what this slide shows, it shows airplane, cable traffic, it shows connections. And essentially what we're seeing, and the reason I brought up some of the companies that are growing really fast, it's that they're getting very good at connecting. And so whether you're in logistics or marketing or finance or IT, it's all about this. And so when I think about, you know, companies like UPS, we're thinking really hard about how are we going to be around another 111 years when some of the packages are going to move digitally instead of physically. What is this digital economy going to do to companies like UPS that have physical assets? How do we get ahead of that? So this is the traditional way. We've been around for 111 years. We have a lot of stuff. We have a lot of services. And I'm not going to read through each one of those on the slide, but as customers become more demanding, as we become more global, the expectations of services have just skyrocketed. So we've added them. And what really is the solution for a really complex environment? It's simplicity. So we have to make it simpler. The economy that we're in is becoming more and more dynamic. The way we're going to attack it and the way we're going to win is to reduce friction, to become simpler. But, as the slide says, change is hard. Change is very hard. And companies get an idea of how they make money. So for UPS, we make money shipping packages. And it's a concept called dominant logic, and it is really, really strong. So every company has a way that they think that this is how we're going to make the cash register ring. So this was one such company. And if you look at this growth, so the blue is revenue, the orange is profit, and this company was the rock star of its day. I mean, if you worked at this company in 1975, it was the Apple, Google, Amazon, the research and development going on there. They were total rock stars. And look at this. Any company that is doing nearly 50% margins, as this company was doing, oh my gosh, that's fantastic. And they maintained it. Look at that chart. They went from 5 billion to 20 billion and actually grew their percentage of profit. All of that's really good. 2.5 CEOs were fantastic. The other half of the third CEO had some problems, and so did every CEO after that. So I was researching this as part of my schoolwork, and this is Kodak. And Kodak it's really interesting. So Steve Sasson is a Kodak employee who in 1975 invented the digital camera, invented it at Kodak. But at the time, the dominant logic of that firm was, we make money selling film. Your camera doesn't use film. Therefore, not a great idea. But it's not like they cut them off. They kept developing digital technologies, and this is why it's so important, is that it's not like when they started to see the crest of that, their profits starting to go down. It's not like they said, oh, I don't see this digital revolution coming. They saw it, and they actually came out with some pretty cool technology, but it was a hobby. It was not at the core of the company, and so what in corporate strategy at UPS, what we're really talking about a lot is not just what do we do differently, but how do we think differently? And that's what didn't happen at Kodak. They brought in a new CEO. They did some of the right things that all the management books will tell you, but the core of the company didn't change. But I want to tell you another story about a guy named Jack, and actually, some of you might have met him because he was here last year. The Jack I'm talking about is a guy named Jack Levis. He was a middle manager in early 2000s that had this crazy idea that he could take in all the information that we collect on packages during the day and create these algorithms that create these ideal routes for all of our service providers so that they minimize the time, the fuel, the carbon output. And people told him he was crazy. He told me this story about his manager pulling him into the office. If you ever met him, he's so humble. And he will never say that he was the creator of Orion, which is this huge big data program that we have that saved us millions. But every company needs a Jack. He told me the story about his supervisor, or his manager, came in and said, Jack, we understand what you're doing, but it's just not working out. It's just, we're not getting there. We're devoting resources, but we're just not getting there. And you're starting to lose credibility, and you have such a great future. Is this really an idea that you want to continue pursuing? And he said, yeah, this can be done. And remember, this is like 2003, 2004. We didn't have all of the big data software that we have today. It was a really huge accomplishment. So why is this a breakthrough? Our drivers each have about 120 stops a day. This is, there we go. This is how many different combinations a driver can make those stops. It's a lot of zeros. That's a big problem. But he didn't see it as a problem. He saw it as an opportunity. This is what I was referring to, is that do you see disruption as a problem, as a challenge, as a threat, or do you see it as an opportunity? And he saw it as an opportunity. And let me tell you, these little changes make a huge difference. And you look at company after company after company, and these small little pivotal decisions by courageous individuals that made all the difference. So essentially today we have, we deliver about 19 million pieces a day. On each package we collect a little over 240 data elements. So it's every day. So that's a pretty big data stream. That comes in, the numbers are crunched, and a route is planned automatically, dynamically, so that the driver doesn't make any left-hand turns. Why is that important? Because if you're making a left-hand turn, you're waiting at a stoplight. You're burning fuel. You're putting carbon in the atmosphere, and you're not delivering packages. But what if I could do the ideal route where it's all right-hand turns, and I'm shortening the distance? That is what he did, and he's just an incredible guy. But every company has those people that break through the walls. So I like this. This is a quote by Schopenhauer, that all truth passes through 3 stages. It's ridiculed, it's violently opposed, and then it's accepted as being self-evident. And if you've been in a corporate environment, it might happen in the academic environment too, you're going to definitely see this. It's called the bandwagon effect. You have all these naysayers that are naysayer, naysayer, naysayer until it turns the corner, and then it was everyone's idea. But that's Schopenhauer. So when I talk about this friction in companies, what am I talking about? And this is actually, the dean said I went back to school, so yes, I'm a student just like you, and I stay up till 2, 3 in the morning trying to hit my deadlines on papers just like you. But over the last few years, I've read literally hundreds of articles trying to figure out, and what really drove me to go back to school is I was seeing this change in the environment, but I wasn't able to break through. Clayton Christensen, who who's a Harvard professor. He wrote The Innovator's Dilemma. He basically breaks innovation into sustainable innovation and disruptive innovation. Sustainable innovation is you're doing what you always do, but you're doing it better, faster, cheaper. Disruptive innovation is you're doing something different. And I like to use the analogy of, it comes from a marketing paper called Marketing Myopia, where customers don't buy a quarter-inch drill, they buy a way to make a quarter-inch hole. So they're not buying a drill, they're buying a way to make a hole. They have something to accomplish. And most companies are really good at making the next best drill. And they put new features on it, and it's one right after another, and go, look at this, it's a new color, it's shiny, it's got another handle here, and it's great. And they keep going, and they keep going, and they keep going. And that's a great strategy until someone finds a better way to make a hole. Then how important is that drill? And so from a corporate strategy department, that's what keeps me up at night. I know how we are servicing customers around the world and improving our logistics systems every year. But new competitors that are coming onto the market, is that the way they're going to do it? Or are they going to find a better way to make a hole? And so it's all about thinking differently. And so I read hundreds and hundreds of papers, and I wish that was an exaggeration, but it wasn't. It's not. It's crazy how much you have to read. And but I'm going to make it easy for you. I had to simplify it for myself, and I kind of broke all those papers around what happens in corporate environments around change and disruption into these three themes. The first one I call cognitive barriers. So a cognitive barrier is if I made a decision today that turned out really well, 2 weeks from now, when I need to make a similar decision, I'm going to think back on what I did there, and it's going to influence how I make this decision. It's called a path dependency, and then it goes on and on and on. And so when you're an executive in a big company, how do you get to be a CEO? How do you get to be a chief operating officer? You get there by being really good at doing the things that make the company great. And so that's great if your industry is staying the same. It's not so great if your industry is changing. And what I will argue is that while, technology and healthcare and others have been changing rapidly for a long time, the big thing that's rocking my world is manufacturing and logistics. Manufacturing and logistics is going through enormous change right now. And again, it's not what do you do differently, it's how you think differently. And that gets to the cognitive barriers. The second category is what I call corporate control valves. So these are not necessarily good or bad. It kind of depends. So let me give you an example of a corporate control valve. How I measure and reward my managers. It's a corporate control valve. So if I'm measuring them off of return on assets, let's say, that's going to create one behavior. If I'm measuring them off of new revenue growth, that's going to create another behavior. And how do I prioritize projects? So this is another corporate control valve, and all of you are probably learning about discounted cash flow and net present value, and and it's basically how companies decide, am I going to invest in project A or B or C or D? And how they measure that and what they assume is the base case. So if I think the base case is that we're going to stay flat, it's going to be a lot harder for me to put money in an investment that might be a little riskier that could go like this or this. But that's never the case, right? Typically, the base case is never flat. It's never zero. It's a bad assumption. But that's a corporate control valve. Culture is another one. So culture basically defines kind of the parameters of acceptable actions within a company. And it's not necessarily bad. In like UPS's case, it's one of the reasons I've been there for 26 years. I love the culture. I love the fact that when the volume was too much for our system to handle over peak week, our corporate office emptied. Unless you had something that was absolutely critical, you were in the facility working and sorting packages. I was on the 3:30 to 10:30 shift at the local hub for 2 weeks as we kind of pitched in to help out. That's the culture, and it's really good. But culture can be an inhibitor or it can be an enabler. Now let's talk about accelerators. So accelerators are all about how a company stays in tune with its external environment. So the argument here is that anything that you do to create better connections, as I talked about before, to create greater connections with your customers and your suppliers is good. So whether that's open innovation and getting ideas from other companies, taking parts in talks like this where you're hearing new ideas and new ways of doing things, that's all part of an accelerator. And that's one of the things that we're really trying to press on at UPS, because we really used to have the idea that, well, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it ourselves, right? And all our IT development was done in-house, and we're just going to do it ourselves. And we know logistics. We've been around for 111 years. The fact is that some of us is never as smart as all of us. And so we're trying to do a lot to reach out. And so accelerators, the thing to take away here is anything that makes sure that your internal view of your company stays in sync with the external view. So how do we get in the game and adapt? Might be. Whoop. You stop clicking. That's what you do. So there's a lot of things that we're doing. These are an example of some of our innovation programs that we're doing to get more people involved in innovation. And the other thing we're trying to do is set up where we push innovation to the edge. And so what I mean by that is the people, we have some people from UPS here that are in sales. No one really knows more about what the customer wants and what's happening in the external environment than the people that are in front of customers every day. So how do you push innovation down to them and give them license to innovate? And I always think about, when I talk about license to innovate, it's, you can't just say, hey, you guys have the freedom to innovate. Go innovate. People will end up doing what they've always done, and they're not gonna take a risk if they don't have to. I think of the best example of license to innovate is John F. Kennedy when he was in front of Congress, and he said, Our goal is to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. He said this in 1961. He had no idea how, he's not a scientist. He had no idea how it was going to be done. But he created a time-bound, quantitative goal. By the end of the decade, put a man on the moon, return him safely to Earth. And it unleashed all this creativity. Because if we're going to do this, we need to think outside of the box, and that's what really, exploded our space program. That's what I'm talking about. That's what we're trying to do. That's what other companies are trying to do. Is you've got to give people license to innovate, and the closer this is done to the customer, the better. So the other way that we do it is through what we call our strategic enterprise fund. So there's all these things out here out in the environment and logistics that we just don't have the internal expertise. And so you can see up here there are companies that are doing crowdsourced deliveries. Peloton Technology does platooning, which is where you have a tractor trailer that a driver is in, followed by two where there's no driver. Sci-Fi Networks is drones. Opturo is a reverse logistics software company. So we're investing in all these companies, and what we're doing is we're gaining knowledge capital. We're not saying we're gonna buy these companies and turn them brown. We're saying there are things out there that we don't know, that if we want to make good decisions, we need to know. And so instead of investing in these companies for financial return, for financial capital, which is a traditional venture capital firm, we talk about it as investing in knowledge capital. And that's what we're doing with these firms. And so one of them that I have circled there is called Fast Radius. And so Fast Radius is a 3D printing company. And we've been very interested in 3D printing. It's, again, it's one of those things that it's a threat and an opportunity. But of course, I like to focus on the opportunity. The one thing that is for sure, things are changing. They're absolutely changing. There's some industries that have already been transformed, like the hearing aid industry several years ago. It's all 3D printed. There are some like, you may not think there are 3D printed parts in aircraft. There have been for a while. GE's LEAP engine has a fuel nozzle that used to be made of 20 separate metal parts that are now one individual 3D printed part. So you used to 20 separate parts that you had to assemble together. Now it's one. They have a new engine that's in development that combines even more parts. I mean, you're seeing this with many, many companies. And so, the world is changing, and what is so unique about this is that you think about how traditional manufacturing works. And it goes back to my shoe example. It's people making millions of the same exact thing. And so there's all this tooling or molds, there's this huge upfront investment, and the first product, whatever it is that comes off that line, is super expensive. But once you get to $1 million or $2 million, it's pretty inexpensive, and it's the way to go. And it's not going away anytime soon. But 3D printing or additive manufacturing is completely different. There is no setup cost. You're not building a mold. You're not building tooling. You're basically creating a digital file that then gets printed. And so the difference between the first one you print and the 10th one you print, or the 100th, it's not that much. And it basically allows a whole new business model for manufacturing. And I'll tell you where UPS really, where this really hit us was in my old job when I was running marketing for global logistics and distribution. We do these service parts logistics networks. And so I'll give you an example. So if you have an MRI machine, for example, if an MRI machine breaks, you're not going to pick up the MRI machine and ship it to UPS to a repair facility. You're going to have to, someone is going to have to go to the MRI machine, a service technician, which means you have to have the parts stored nearby. So we have over 1,000 field stocking locations where customers store those parts. So we said, okay. So we see this 3D printing and we see it getting better and better and more materials. What happens if we can store that in virtual inventory instead of physical inventory? Would customers go for that? How big a difference would it be? And we know the answer to that question because those parts are stored in our facility. And so what we found is there's a bunch of those parts that turn very slowly or not at all. It's a complete waste of the supply chain. So what if a pig could fly? What if you could store it in virtual inventory and print it on demand? And that's what really got us thinking about, this is a change that either we're going to be a victim of the change or we're going to be part of the change. Again, disruption is just change. It is your decision or lack of decision that is going to determine what side of the change you're on. So I talked about the technology, and this is a what's called fused deposition modeling. You don't need to know that, but it's kind of basic 3D printing. This is some of the latest 3D printing. This is a company called Carbon out of Redwood City, California. And it's one of the 3 companies we're building what we call our additive micro factories around. You look at that, it kind of looks like Terminator 2, right? Kind of coming out of the goo. It's incredible in terms of speed and cost. It's an incredible leap forward. And we're seeing that more and more across this environment. It's not like we haven't been to this show before, right? We saw what happened with Moore's Law and microprocessors. We're seeing tremendous innovation in this space. Okay, I'm going to hit it again, and that's going to go 2 slides. Let's see. The computer likes this slide too. Here we go. So think about it. Today, what we do is we ship things around the world from these manufacturing plants, and they starts at a manufacturing plant, comes through on a plane or a ship, gets to the U.S., and it maybe gets on a train or a big truck and eventually gets to a distribution center, and a brown truck gets it from there, and it goes through the UPS system and gets to your door, whether you're a business or a consumer. This is different. So if I need a part and I'm in Shanghai and the part is in Ames, I am not going to ship the part from Ames to Shanghai. I'm going to send it digitally to Shanghai, where it's going to go to a facility and it's going to form there and then be delivered last mile. That's what we're seeing. And so we see manufacturing changing to become more distributed. We don't know how fast this is going to happen. There's a lot of unanswered questions, but eventually it's going to happen. It's like think about autonomous vehicles. No one knows when we're going to exactly get to autonomous vehicles, But if I said, at some point in the future, do you think that autonomous vehicles will be the dominant form of transportation? I think a lot of people would say, yeah, I think that's true. We think the same thing is with 3D printing. So we have that fundamental belief, and so we're saying, okay, let's get in front of this so that we're not, we're not a victim of it. So we see manufacturing becoming more distributed, where goods are produced more frequently in lower quantities, closer to the point of consumption. So to a company like UPS, what does that mean? That means that people are going to store less and ship less. Okay? I've had some executives question my sanity. Say, Alan, you realize what we do, right? You realize what business we're in. We store stuff and we ship stuff. And now you're promoting this whole new business model. Think about what it was like for Steve Sasson at Kodak. Steve comes into the boardroom and says, hey, I've got the next great thing. Digital photography. It doesn't use film. What kind of reception do you think they got? Persistence. Persistence. That's the key. So what are the things that we're doing with 3D printing today? So we talked about service parts. We're printing parts today. What's really interesting is customized, personalized products. We're doing a lot of kind of low quantity type production. But I'll get this right. So this is something that's really interesting. That carbon technology prints this, the sole of this shoe. It's a matrix structure that there's actually 20,000 connections in the sole of each shoe. And they're producing these today. You can buy them. Actually, they're only available. They have one store in New York and one store in LA where you can buy them. And this year, they're not really customized. What's coming out, which will probably be towards the end of next year, is you're going to go to a location, you're going to stand on a mat, then you're going to run across a mat, and they're going to print shoes for you that are exactly your size, not a size 10, a size Allen. And they're not going to be the same for my right and left foot, because you might not know this, but you don't put the same pressure on both feet. And it's going to be, depending on how you run or what sport you're in, it's going to be customized just for you. This is going to happen with knees. It's going to happen with hammer handles. It's going to be a revolution. And 15, 20 years from now, kids are going to be saying, why did you ever settle for best fit? It's going to be a concept that just doesn't make any sense to them. But we're at the very beginning of that revolution right now. Okay. There we go. So this is the one that I try not to show this, so don't take a copy of these slides and send them to our management committee. It makes them really nervous when they see this slide, but it's just to make a point that the way that we have to do business in the digital revolution is changing. And quite frankly, I can't tell you whether we're going to be Kodak or whether we're going to go on for another 111 years. We are right in the thick of it right now. We are absolutely in the thick of it. And you know what? I love it. I love it because there's so much change, there's so much opportunity, there's so much possibility when pigs can fly. And I'll leave you with this. And so I typically, when I'm talking to, different industry groups, I have this whole list of things of, key takeaways, do this, that. This is another Clayton Christensen mantra that I really believe in. And it all comes down to make lives better. Solve for insufficient wealth, access, skill, or time. So whatever you get into when you leave Iowa State, what does that company fundamentally do? How is it making lives better? Because if you look at the companies that are doing really, really well, they're connected and they're making lives better. They're making it easier. They're making it less expensive. They're providing greater access that wasn't available before. That's what's really interesting. And so that's what we're trying to do at UPS. We're right in the middle of it. And what I'd like to do now is I'm sorry I talked a little too long, but I've got 5-10 minutes. I'd love to take any questions you have. So have at it. Yes?
So is UPS entering into contracts with various companies and service parts, for example, so that you have access to their CAD files for intellectual property so that you can print them?
So it's a really good question. So the question was, so for all of these companies that have parts that are stored in our facilities, are we entering into agreements where we get their digital files? And it's a great question because